So for this third video lecture for our medical sociology class, we'll talk about the Philippine healthcare system. Now, I think this is a very important lecture to start off before we get into the nitty-gritty of medical sociology, because many of the textbooks and the sources that are available in dominant publishing conglomerates really center on the US healthcare system and the European healthcare system as their main examples. But of course, if we really want to be able to understand the local realities of health in our country, we need to also be able to understand how it is different and the uniqueness of the Philippine health system. And so that's going to be what we'll be discussing for this session. So we'll talk about the state of health and healthcare in the Philippines, beginning with basically some statistics, and then we'll talk about the different organizations and processes of healthcare in the Philippines. Some of these you may have already have personal experiences, maybe as someone who had been sick before or someone who had accompanied another person when they were sick. And then we'll talk about the different challenges in the healthcare delivery system. Again, you might have observed, witnessed, or personally experienced some of these. And so we'll try to explain them and also expand further our perspectives to look at, the bottlenecks into which factors are there to contribute to unequal access to healthcare and also poor health and unequal health outcomes in the Philippine population. So let's begin with a demographic and geographic description of the Philippines. So in the basis or in the document where this presentation was based, the ones that are typed, those were the statistics, but I have already updated them and you could see them in red ink. So the latest count for our islands is 7,641. In 2017, when this was published, it was 104.9, but in 2024, it's already 112.7 million people in 2024 July. And then our GDP growth in 2017 was 6.7. It was one of the Asia's fastest growing economies, but in the third quarter of 2025, the GDP growth was noted to be 4%. Of course, in between 2017 and 2025, there were many things that happened. Of course, you have the COVID-19 pandemic and, a slew of global economic recessions. And so the Philippines were hit by a lot of economic issues. So a little bit, there's a lot of recovery that still needs to be done. It's not as salient as it was way back then. And then in the same time that this was published, 1/3 of the population is young. And you would see here that in the Philippines, in 2024, 28% is between 10 to 24 years old, which is the official WHO age bracket for the youth. And the mean age is 24 years old. So we can consider that the Philippines is a young population, as opposed to most developed countries wherein we can say that they are having graying population. Like for example, Japan has a graying population, Singapore has a graying population, South Korea has a graying population, meaning the population pyramid is getting heavy on top, and then the base is lower, as opposed to the Philippines wherein you have a low base. So if this is the age, this is the young age, and this is the older age. So ang base ng Filipinas for the population pyramid is it's wider. The base is wider. But for developed countries, like those in the EU, the rich countries in EU, your OECD countries, your Japan, Singapore, you expect a wider top and you have a narrower bottom, and this is where the demographic issues or crises that are experienced by South Korea and Japan are really springing from. Of course, we have an increasing life expectancy in the Philippines. We'll talk about that later. But we are still very much a young population, meaning median age is around 24, 23. So ibig sabihin, half of the population is below that. So when we look at it, there's a lot of economic promise to that demographically. But of course, this was the adult literacy 96.5% when the paper that we're basing this from has been published. But we know already, based from the EDCOM reports that have been recently being presented in social media, that the learning gaps have never been so wide. We see that only 3% have actually met their competencies at grade 12. So again, you have a very young population, a very vibrant, young, vigorous population, but there are literacy concerns, competency concerns, and so that affects economic productivity. Now, when this was published, the Philippines has been third in terms of disaster risk. But now, in 2025, we are actually the first. And why is that? Of course, not only are we, visited by 20 cyclones, typhoons, super typhoons every year, which causes a lot of economic damage, which causes a lot of lives lost. But at the same time, we're also part of the Ring of Fire. And so we have a lot of meteorologic and geological disasters, geological hazards such as, let's say, volcanic eruptions, like the one we just recently had in Mayon. And then we also have earthquakes. There are many earthquakes happening almost every day in the Philippines, multiple times every day. And then we're still waiting for the big one to happen around Manila area within the next 25 years. And so these are basically some demographic, geographical status quo that we have in the Philippines. And all of this contributes to how healthy we are as a nation. So in 2020, the maternal mortality ratio was 144 maternal deaths per 100 live births in 2020. And this was a striking increase. And this was very much correlated to pandemic-related obstacles because women weren't able to go to their barangay health centers for them to be able to access free prenatal care and to see whether or not they were, they were carrying a healthy baby inside them, or they were having a healthy pregnancy. And if they weren't, they were at risk. Some things could have already been done, right? And then for child mortality, we have different expressions of this. So we have infant mortality rates, meaning those who die 1 year and 18 months and below. And then for child mortality, we have the under 5 mortality. So those who die before reaching the age of 5. Now, maternal mortality ratio and infant mortality ratio and child mortality ratio is one of the most sensitive indicators of the quality of public health and healthcare in a particular state. Why? Because, again, we expect women to be pregnant. It's part of a life cycle, right? We expect children to be born. And if your child or if the infant cannot go beyond infancy and they die before they reach toddlerhood, or mothers die because of maternal reasons, then it means that healthcare might not be that good in terms of a particular state. So these are very sensitive indicators of the quality of the healthcare of a nation. Right? So the goal is to be able to decrease maternal mortality and to decrease infant mortality, under 5 mortality. And then another indicator for improving health is increased life expectancy. So for life expectancy, there's increase in 2015 to 2020, but still failed to meet national goals because the national goals were 70 and above. So we're still under 60, under 70, right? It's relatively higher than most underdeveloped countries, but still below 70, right? And then, of course, there's still that gender inequality wherein men die earlier than women, but women have more morbidity than men. When we say morbidity, this is diagnosed disease. When we say mortality, these are deaths. So when we say child mortality, this is death of children. When we say maternal mortality, these are deaths due to maternal causes. Maternal causes being those diseases that happen during pregnancy, during childbirth, and during the postpartum period. Postpartum period is 6 up to 6 months. No, the mother had delivered the baby. So that's the maternal. So that's the antenatal period, as we call it. Perinatal period, right? So that's what we call it. And then there's slow progress in childhood nutrition. So in 2015, it was 33.4% in terms of malnutrition, right? And it just became 26.7% in 2021. So we would like it to be faster because, again, undernutrition among children is very problematic because it increases the vulnerability of the host, if you remember agent-host environment model, and so mas madali siya makapitan ng mga sakit and other things, right? And of course, the productivity at school, the timeliness of the social and physical development of the child is also affected by the quality of the nutritional status of that child. And so we really want all children to be well nourished. As we know, child nutrition is a classic, what we call a biosocial marker. Why? Because stunting reflects not just the calories that are being taken by the children, but also poverty, sanitation, and constraints in caregiving and repeated infections, right? On immunization, multiple sources show that coverage gaps are a real vulnerability. So the target is 95%. When I say immunization, ito yung bakuna. So we have what we call the expanded immunization program in the DOH, wherein there's a set of vaccines that children and mothers are supposed to have, and there should be stocks in the barangay health center. But of course, there is a missing. We missed the target. No, so we only had 72%, wherein our target is 95%. Of course, what we want ultimately is 100%. But of course, the 5% probably would include those who might be allergic to the vaccines, no, etc. But of course, one of the reasons why we have low vaccine intake or lowered vaccine intake is, of course, decreased trust in vaccines, which comes from many issues, Dengvaxia, for instance. And of course, there is really a growing social movement towards anti-vaxxer and anti-science movements. We'll talk about them when we get to the contemporary issues, but that's one of them. But also one of the things that is contributing to this is the lack of stocks, no? So sometimes those who do want their children to be immunized, their local government unit or their barangay health center does not have the stocks. So that's another problem. So gusto mo magpabakuna, wala namang bakuna doon sa iyong lugar. So that's another issue. And so we see naman that since the 1930s, there has been an improvement in the development in the Philippines. Like post-World War II, we have developed well. There had been a lot of setbacks because of, of course, what had happened in those, many decades, that historical turn. But also, that means that we had also inherited issues that are seen in developed countries. No? And in developed countries, you have your rising non-communicable diseases. So these are the changes in lifestyle which contribute to the rising tide of NCDs like heart disease, vascular diseases. Vascular meaning diseases related to your blood vessels, and cancer are now leading causes of death. So why is this related to development? Because these are very much related to hyperconsumption, eating so much, sedentary lifestyle, etc. Right? Exposure to a lot of carcinogens. When you say carcinogens, these are substances that can increase cancer risks, no? So that's carcinogens, right? But also at the same time, we aren't that developed yet. So we still have the usual undeveloping country issue or low middle income country issues of persistent communicable diseases. Like for example, in Western countries, in developed countries, they have already eradicated polio. Well, of course, don't talk about US now because they have polio again, they have measles again, they have tuberculosis again. But generally, before this issues re-emerged, right? They have almost eradicated polio, measles, tuberculosis, to the fact that they only learn about tuberculosis on paper. In the Philippines, our tuberculosis burden is still very high. When we say burden, it is sort of a term when we say burden, meaning it talks about prevalence, right? How many do we have in terms of the morbidity? Mortality is also a part of that burden, but also a part of the burden is how much money we spend for that particular disease or condition. And burden also talks about the amount of productivity lost. So for example, a part of computing for the burden or a part of accounting for the burden of a particular disease is when you have the disease, ilang beses kang mag-absent sa school or ilang beses kang mag-absent sa work. So that's also a part of the burden. So when we talk about a disease burden, it doesn't only just talk about how many had actually had that sickness or had that disease, but also how much have you paid for it, how much money have you lost because of it, and not only from you, but also from the government who might be paying for you. And also at the same time, how much economic productivity is lost because of you having that illness. And so, in economic terms, and in sociological terms also as well, it is a great interest for our society to have a healthy population. Because when somebody is ill, that's economic productivity lost. That is money lost. Either out of pocket or government funding, if that is a universal health care. Right? So, there. And then, of course, we have the external and environmental threats, which explained earlier, a lot of climate change issues, typhoons, geographical issues, and of course, injuries that are related to urbanization. Mabangga ka, no? Injuries like vehicular accidents because of construction, right? Actually, there's an argument that according to that this third threat is urbanization is also the cause of our issues in terms of stress, mismanagement, mental health issues. No? So minsan, mental health is put under non-communicable diseases. Sometimes it's put under the third, which is the diseases of urbanization or external environmental threats. Taken together, this is what we call the triple burden of disease. First burden, communicable disease. Second burden, non-communicable disease. Third burden, external and environmental threats or diseases of urbanization. So, in the Philippines, whereas developed countries have already sort of usurped the communicable diseases or have already transcended beyond the communicable diseases, the Philippines still is a part of that health burden. We still have that burden. But we also have non-communicable diseases because we are also having cultural effects of globalization and development, hyperconsumption, sedentary lifestyle, etc. And at the same time, because of our unique demographic and geographic and natural characteristics that are and the hazards that are found in our country, are also exposed to a lot of climate disaster threats. And so, the Philippines, health-wise, the health system of the Philippines is burdened with these three factors. Triple burden of disease. Now, what is usually the main organizational, legal, structural issue that causes us to have unequal healthcare provision and health outcomes in the country. And usually, when you talk to a physician or a public health scientist, they will point out to the 1991 Local Government Code. Basically, the Local Government Code means that we're putting the management of localities to cities, municipalities. And so that's devolution, no? While there is some empowering feeling, that devolution means that we'll be able to meet the local issues, because again, probably from a national perspective, the unique local issues might need more unique perspectives that only the municipalities and the cities could see. The leaders of that, or the chief executives of those areas could see. But at the same time, if your city and your municipality, the health offices there, or the DOH branches in that area doesn't have, funds, if they don't have funds, or they don't have organizational capacity, like they don't have technical capacity, like kulang sila ng doktor, they don't have enough doctors to be able to lead, or they don't have enough facilities. So even if they are they know the unique issues of their localities, they might not have the resources. And sometimes, sadly, the chief executives within these localities, cities and municipalities, may also not have the political will to do so. And we've seen how, buti pa tong sa city na to, the mayor does it this way. Buti pa to sa city na to, the mayor does it this way. Sana doon na lang ako nakatira. Because they have better healthcare, they have better ordinances, they have better structures, they have good public healthcare systems, etc. And that's the issue that we have, And so we have a fragmented way of ensuring healthcare provision because of the 1991 Devolution Act. So in short, the national, or the Department of Health, have devolved the execution of health-related agenda, ordinances, healthcare to the provinces through the district hospitals, and the municipalities and cities through primary healthcare units like health centers and rural health units. Sorry. And then, ang natira na lang sa DOH ay the specialty hospitals. So, sino tong specialty hospitals na to? National Kidney and Transplant Institute, Philippine Heart Center. So, those that are very specialized, lung center of the Philippines. And of course, regional hospitals. So, yun yung hawak na lang ng DOH. By the way, PGH is not under DOH. PGH is under UP system. So, the funding for PGH is with UP. So, it's a national training hospital. So, hindi siya kumukuha ng DOH funding. Except, of course, if there are DOH-funded research within them, but mainly the operations are coming from UP. So, and then another and a larger provider of health is in the private sector. So, these are the for-profit, non-profit providers, clinics, hospitals, and laboratories. Right? So, pag private sector, syempre, most of the time, out of pocket siya. Most of the time. Another issue of fragmentation in terms of organizational capacities and organizations in healthcare in the Philippines is that there are multiple agencies that have different sort of adjudication about different aspects of health. Like, for example, we have DOH, via the Health Facilities and Services Regulatory Bureau, they're the ones who license facilities like hospitals, laboratories, and clinics. So, sila yung magsasabi na, okay, you can be able to run a hospital or run a lab, no? Or to be able to have an OPD, an outpatient clinic. And then the Food and Drug Administrations are the ones who regulates the products that are related to medicine. So this could include drugs, medical services, devices like X-rays, magnetic resonance imaging, ultrasounds, electrocardiograms, but of course also includes those that are more innovative, the more state of the art, no? And then food and cosmetics. And then you have PhilHealth, no? The Philippine Health Insurance Incorporation, usually called Medicare, but now we call it PhilHealth, is the one that accredits providers for its payment network. So currently, what the PhilHealth does is that it covers for certain amount of the health. If you are contributing to PhilHealth, it covers for an amount of what you're paying for, right? When you get hospitalized, no? And then the Insurance Commission oversees naman for the private health maintenance organizations or the HMOs like IntelliCare, MaxiCare, etc. And then the PRC is the one that takes care or regulates the production and the training of different medical professionals like doctors, nurses, midwives, respiratory therapists, medical technologists, physical therapists, etc. And so you have multiple agencies. And of course, magkakakonect na to. Like for example, for you to be able to, let's say, open up a lying-in clinic, you have to have a licensed midwife and a licensed obstetrician, no, to be able to manage that, right? And so those kinds of things. So magkakakonekta sila, no? But fragmented because each agency, no, they have their own adjudication, they have their own jurisdiction of what they could regulate, no, in relation to this larger health system. So we have a near universal insurance coverage thanks to PhilHealth, no? And then we have out-of-pocket payments still that dominate health spending. And probably you've seen this all over in social media about, oh, this is how much I've spent in the hospital, whether private or public, but this is the only percentage that PhilHealth covers, right? So 34.3% of our total expenditure in 2014 is covered by our health insurance, and then 12% is covered by the private health insurance like your HMOs, and then 53% is still OOP or out of pocket. And again, this is very important sociologically because out of pocket payments, no, they can contribute to poverty. They can contribute to the decline of the economic health of households and families. So it's important, no, for society, for health systems to have better health insurance as a part of a larger social policy, because we don't want people to fall into debt because of, diseases that they may not even be at fault for, right? So, there. So, as mentioned, near universal enrollment, diba, 92%. But again, no, still a lot of out-of-pocket payments, no? Again, the financial protection is, still very low, 30 to 52%. Medyo malaki naman nung time ng COVID. If it's a COVID, then medyo malaki yung coverage that you'll be able to get if you were diagnosed with COVID. And of course, that, there were a lot of issues that came with that, no? By the way, going back to the triple burden of disease, right? So, balik tayo sa triple burden of disease. Communicable disease, right, is still something that we have high burden. And one of those burdens is HIV. We are the fastest growing prevalence of HIV in the world. Not just in Asia Pacific po, in the world. And in all fairness naman, no, to our HIV law, PhilHealth covers for the antiretroviral therapy. This being received by those who have been diagnosed with HIV infections, and those that have enrolled themselves through treatment centers, no. PhilHealth covers the antiretroviral therapies. These are the pills or the medications that are being taken so that they could decrease the number of viral load inside their blood, no, so that they can be undetectable. Ibig sabihin, the number of virus is too little for it to be detected by the diagnostic criteria, and if that happens, it's untransmittable, no. So I think that's one win for PhilHealth, I guess, no, because PhilHealth is paying for that. And so when you get infected by HIV, and of course there are issues about stigma and everything, no, but if you get registered and if you are enrolled in a treatment hub, then you can get free ART. But the problem is, of course, for those who have already advanced HIV disease, hindi nakasama yon, no? Those that need, high level of antibiotics, hindi na yung kasama. Medyo mahal din yung mga vial noon. And so, there are, again, dominance of drug costs na hindi covered ng PhilHealth. And then, of course, high OOP patients, payments push a significant percentage of households into poverty each year. Sabi nga nila, di ba, what can drive you to the line of poverty, drag you down the line of poverty is, magkasakit ka lang isang beses, it drags you down to the line of poverty. And then there's also that inequality in terms of health resources. So for example, in National Capital Region, there are 23 hospital beds per 10,000 people, but in Visayas and Mindanao, there are only 8 per 10,000 people. In the Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, there is only 0.9 per 10,000 people. In BARM, I'm sorry. No? And then, in somewhere before 2017, WHO said, and we can contest this later, when we get to decolonizing health. WHO said that all pregnancies all over the world must be attended by a skilled provider, example, a midwife. And we see here that still, 79 there is still 20% among the poorest who is not attended by a skilled provider. The importance, of having a skilled provider when you are doing labor and delivery is to ensure nga that there is lower risk for infant mortality, lower risk for maternal mortality. And then also what happens, the practice is, if you have money, you can bypass the local health unit and go directly to the hospital. The problem here is that it could be a waste of time and also a waste of expenditure for both you and the hospital, right? So the goal is to have a primary care physician or a primary care unit to see you first and determine whether you need more advanced care. Kasi dito sa hospital, sa mga tertiary hospitals, that's already advanced care, right? So the goal is somebody has to see you first. But the problem is if the local health unit, or the primary health hospital or the barangay health center is not competent enough, the organizational capacity is not good, then the tendency is the person goes to the hospital directly. And so sometimes hindi pa naman kailangan na magpa-hospital siya, nandoon siya. So what happens is that the time and the resources that is supposed to be spent to persons who really need that time and effort because they have more advanced conditions, hindi agad sila nakikita. And, one of the things that I noticed, and this is my personal observation, is that particularly municipalities near NCR, instead na yung kanilang mga mayors and their mayors, and their leaders, instead of them building good local health units, secondary hospitals, no, and good tertiary hospitals within their municipalities, what they build or what they buy or purchase are ambulances. Ambulances wherein the politicians can put their faces and their names, no? And then that ambulance will take you to PGH. And then PGH will be chock full of, patients coming from different areas of Luzon, going as far as Region 5. And so when you go to, I haven't been, I have been assigned in one of the wards of PGH before, but not the ER. But I've seen the ER from afar, and it's just, there's so many people, so many ambulances coming from different parts of Luzon, doon pumupunta diretsyo. And also what happens is that kaya sa pumunta sa hospital is because when their diseases are not yet advanced, hindi pa sila nagpapatingin muna. So what happens is that nagpapatingin lang sila when the disease is already quite advanced and the prognosis is already poor. And that is also something to do with a lot of social protections, right? So if you cannot absent from work, because if absent ka from work, when you go to the hospital, mawawalan ka ng kita. So you'd rather just, indain mo na lang yung sakit, just pull through, soldier through the symptoms that you're feeling, because you cannot miss a day of work, because missing a day of work means economic decline for you. And so that's why social protections are very important. Social protections that must be given by the institutions that we have. No? So in our homes, in our neighborhoods, it should have been our barangay health centers. In the schools that we are enrolled in, if we're students, it's supposed to be our clinics. Pero ang problema, for example, in a school, in an public elementary school, you have only one nurse for 5 elementary schools, and each elementary school has 1,000 students. Imagine. And then for your workplaces, you have your, occupational physicians and your occupational nurses, which again, has to take care of a lot of employees. And then of course, you hopefully have PhilHealth, and of course, if medyo posh yung inyong workplace, then you also have additional HMOs, no? Just in case, so that you don't have any out of pocket. But of course, the question is, do you have sick leaves? Like, hindi lahat ng trabaho may sick leave. So pag walang sick leave, mabawasan ka ng pambayad o mabawasan ka ng kita. So, tiisin ko na lang yung sakit, magpapasok ako kasi sayang yung kita. Total naman, baka mawala din to. Imbis na pumunta ka sa health center to get it checked, so that if it's something, it's actually a problem yon. But if you're rich, that's not a problem. You don't have to go to the barangay health center. And masakit ang ulo ko, punta ako sa neurologist. Masakit yung kasukasuhan ko, punta ako sa rheumatologist. Diba? Oh my God, masakit yung likod ko, punta ako sa orthopedic surgeon. Punta ako sa rehab doctor. Immediately. Even if kaya naman siya ng general practitioner. So that's also one of the issues, no? I remember this sorry, I'm already making kwento, no? But I remember this very peculiar news na parang nadapa si Bimbi, the son of Chris Aquino. Nadapa si Bimbi, nabagok ng kaunting ulo, and then MRI agad. And it's not just the magnetic resonance imaging, ha? It's like the non-claustrophobic ones. Ibig sabihin, it is more energy consuming, it is more expensive, no? Dahil lang nabagok yung ulo. I mean, sure, if I had all of the money in the world, of course I'd give it's like bringing an Armalite to a fist fight, right? That's how it sounds. Like MRI agad without any, wala mo ng physical examination, no? So, because the goal is, to get you through the less economically demanding and less professionally demanding muna, no, before we go to the more risky diagnosis and before we go to the risky treatments, right? So Yeah. So just imagine the amount of money, the amount of energy that is the carbon footprint, the water footprint, no, that has been done just because nabagok yung ulo. And you can just imagine, like, if you're a really rich person and you can be able to pay for it, go ahead. But like, yeah. But originally, and sometimes naman, nagiging problema naman to in countries wherein there is universal healthcare. So for example, of course, issue naman nila to sa Canada and also in the United Kingdom, they have the NHS, no, the National Health System in UK, that before you get to be seen by a specialist, you have to see a primary care first. And the primary care physician will be the one to say, now, yeah, you can see, an orthopedic surgeon. Yeah, I think you do have, a pending, you do have an issue with your gallbladder. Okay, so you can see a hepatologist or you see a gastroenterologist. But the primary care physician or the family physician has to see you first. No, in the Philippines, there's no like that. No, so ang issue naman nila is parang, it takes time because, for example, the primary care physician, sige, you'll be able to see an orthopedic surgeon, and then the orthopedic surgeon's free schedule is in a month. Yun naman yung issue nila doon. And then that's their issue. Ang issue naman natin is more of, for example, ikaw ay taga-BARM and you need an orthopedic surgeon, pupunta ka pa ng Metro because most of the specialists, no, the orthopedic surgeons, the urologists, the nephrologists, the urologists, the respiratory therapy, the internal medicine, although internal med naman is quite marami naman tayo noon, but like the really subspecialties, they are concentrated in the NCR, concentrated in Metro Cebu, Metro Davao. So if you are living outside these regions, you have to go through all of this before you can actually access those very specialized care. No, so yeah, so ito yung issue natin. Sorry, medyo napahaba yung explanation ko doon, no? But we can talk about this more in the in-person later. So the future vision is to have a integrated delivery network, no, instead of one that is fragmented wherein the patient is the one, moving from one place to the next, no? So we want a more integrated service delivery system, but it will entail a lot of work and it will entail a lot of regulation. But from a neoliberal standpoint, some hospitals may not like it, no? So there are a lot of policy negotiations that has to happen so that there would be a more integrated service delivery, so that those who need to be seen can be seen. No, and then of course, universal healthcare. Everybody should be a part of PhilHealth, and then of course the local ordinances should have sana, the technical capacities. A local government should have technical capacities to be able to care for at least, the common diseases, or at least be in a good enough kilometer radius to a specialty hospital or to a tertiary hospital wherein mas maganda yung mga, or mas complex or advanced yung mga treatments and diagnosis. No? So that's sort of the dream. No? Yun yung dream ng universal healthcare. No? So that the government, that of course the goal is that the PhilHealth will become not just, an insurer, but also what we call a strategic purchaser. When we say a strategic purchaser, ang gusto natin, PhilHealth does not only cover the cost, but also because it is the one that pays for everything. It can demand lower prices and better quality services from health agencies. Kaso this strategic purchaser dream is really in limbo because again, you have to grapple with neoliberal frameworks here. Siyempre, the hospitals, particularly the private ones, they're very market driven. So they want to be able to charge what they want to charge. So it needs tougher regulation. And Yun ang problema natin dito. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of that. Of course, I don't perfectly know the ins and outs of that. I'm not a policy specialist or a health economist, no. But that's the dream, no. Ideally, because that is what had happened, no, in countries with universal health care. The government has become a strategic purchaser so that they can demand na, itong ibabayad sa iyo. Kasi kami lang naman ang di ba? Parang instead na magmonopolyo ang mga hospital, ang mga healthcare agencies at saka healthcare professionals, ang nagmonopolyo, minonopolyo ng gobyerno ang pagbayad. So dahil sa akin, ako lang naman ang nagbabayad, no? At wala ka nang pwedeng makuhang ibang customer, I be the one to decide how much I pay you. No? So there is larger. Kaya nga, yun yung tinatawag natin na democratic socialist. No? Kasi it's the government, sort of, the state that sort of covers. Ang problema nga lang, yun nga, the quality naman ng issue nila. No? So, I don't know if it's a pros or cons, but I think it's terms of the maturity. No? Yun. So, now we talked about the economic and financial models, no, political and governance structures that, have contributed to the healthcare system challenges, and systemic inertia, meaning, yung maturity of organizations from local governments, from regional governance to national governance, need a lot of improving. But also there are more informal sociocultural realities and ideologies that affects all of this, healthcare system challenges in the Philippines. So ano yung mga issues na yun? So syempre, patronage politics. No, so diyan na lumapasok yung bakit gustong-gusto nila yung malasakit center. Bakit yung payouts, no, bakit gusto na pumipila? Because gusto utang na loob, diba, sa mga mayor, utang na loob sa mga councilor, yung pagpapagamot para iboto mo sila eventually, because patronage politics is very strong in the Philippines. So what happens is that instead of it's the system that provides for the healthcare, what happens is that it is funneled through the name of, or through the labeled project of a particular politician. So it becomes now not the government's program, but a politician's program, or politician's project, or politician's, providence. Patronage politics, malasakit centers, no? Which, by the way, malasakit centers, a big chunk of what malasakit centers is providing is also coming from the PhilHealth. It's just really repackaged. We'll talk about it, no, when we get there, no? And then there's political resistance to reform, both at the central and the local levels, okay? So this is not just the central, but the local levels, maybe they want to reform, maybe the political will is there, but they don't have enough physicians, they don't have health economists, they don't have a lot of technical expertise. And so that's where NGOs come in, like USAID, which we don't have a lot of USAID anymore. So I remember being a part of a study that evaluated the work of USAID, no, in terms of providing technical capacities and resources for regional hospitals, for municipal hospitals to have mobile X-ray clinics for tuberculosis surveillance. And what happened usually is that after, diba, we will train you, etc. And then after 2 years, the funding will be gone. The problem is, hindi na magamit yung mobile X-rays. Bakit? Wala kasing na-train na X-ray technologist. Walang na-train na walang radiologist. So, who's gonna read the X-ray films? So, there is political resistance, but also there's organizational lack of organizational maturity and technical capacities. Yung may iba naman na may technical capacity pero ang aatupagin ay patronage politics. Example nga, no, at ito yung, one of my doctor friends, ito yung biro nga namin, it's because it's easier to plaster your name in an ambulance than a hospital. That's why, they buy more ambulances, no? And so that you would remember na instead of you thinking na bakit nga ba walang ospital sa aking munisipalidad, ang isipin mo, buti na lang may ambulansya na binigay sa akin si Mayor para kapunta ako ng PGH. So, that's... Sorry, this has become quite a rant, but yeah. So obviously, what you get from me as your faculty here in social is I'm quite immersed. Not that immersed even. So you can just imagine those who are really working in the hospitals, all of the rants, no? But these are some of them, no? So, and then we need to have effective public health reform that must contend with the political economy of health. So I was talking about, like, market forces, neoliberalization, globalization. Yeah, so those are the things that we have to contend with, right? Again, no, this is another issue. This is the issue we've been talking about, how decentralization, devolution, ideally could have been great in theory, but when you don't have organizational capacity or financial capacity to be able to, to be able to implement those local aspirations, then wala, hindi siya nangyayari. And then there's unclear mandates and lack of capacity building. So ayan na nga, neoliberalism and increasing privatization. Siyempre, if there's increasing privatization, bumababa yung ability of the government to become a strategic purchaser. So, ang nangyayari, the market forces now contend with how much our healthcare services are. And so, and also contends how much PhilHealth can cover it. So what happens is that there's an increase of out-of-pocket. And then, of course, we have different macroeconomic shocks like the Asian financial crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course, all of the crises that we're having now, like pulling out of US aid, pulling out of CDC funding, just a sharing. For example, a lot of our HIV free treatment centers, are really funded organizationally by USAID. So when USAID pulled out, many, a lot of treatment hubs have to downsize organizationally kasi wala na silang pangbayad sa salaries ng mga volunteers, salaries ng mga nagtatrabaho doon, not necessarily the volunteers. And then the CDC, for example, they fund, for instance, yung mga collection of data. So I just remember I was going to give a data set to the CS group for them to have additional health data sets. And wala na, naka-block na yung website ng CDC that has all the data outside the US. And you know why? You know why? Because this is because of the current political climate in America. Right? So, yeah. And I've also been a part of a project that looked into vaccination, HPV vaccination in selected municipalities and cities in the Philippines. And, for example, in Navotas City, there's an increased trust of parents to HPV vaccination. Ibig sabihin, more parents want their children to be vaccinated by HPVs. Ang problema, lack of vials, lack of vaccines. So, nangyayari, you have only 40 vaccines for like the whole grade 7. So, paano pipili yung teacher? So, draw lots, randomization. So, those kinds of things. And then, again, imagine the public teacher, the one talking to the parents, asking for informed consent for HPV. Imagine the organizational fragmentation, right? Because you only have one nurse for 5 public elementary schools. The public teacher is the one asking informed consent from the parents on top of teaching duties. So, so many concerns, right? So, sociologically, looking at that, parang, it's easy may sakit ako, pagalingin mo ko, but you will now see the layered social realities. But also, what we want to be able to see here are, areas of resistance and resilience, So, given all of the restraints, how do teachers do it? How do nurses do it? How do constrained government units do it? Why are there successes in LGUs? that are dati, corruption ridden, but eventually they went more progressive, better governance. Saan ang galing yun? So that sociology provides us some lens to how the verticalization of power and horizontalization of power sort of helps us understand why health is better in certain areas in the Philippines and not in others hindi masyado, no? And then there's still a limited integration of traditional practices of the Philippines, no? Like for example, we have a lot of pre-colonial and also very indigenous practices for health, like hilot. Although hilot naman is starting to be professionalized, I guess, no? Although it is only professionalized within still a biomedical system, no? So highly biomedical pa rin ang ating training, no? And although nag-increase naman na yung production and commercialization and technologization of let's say herbal medicines, no, bayabas for instance, lagundi for instance, no. I have many issues about that, but still there's a limited integration, no, about this, no. You can just imagine during the time of when there is a national mandate na okay, every delivery has to be attended by a skilled professional. So ano mangyayari dun sa mga hilot? Hilot means these are the traditional birthing attendants. So what happens to them? So I can tell you the story of that in our in-person class. But yeah, there's still limited integration, but this is also very much a neoliberal thing, I guess, because many of our traditional ecological knowledges are really resistant to being monetized, resistant to being commercialized, right? Because it's very collectivist. And so when it's not monetized, it's not going to be put in policies that are very market-driven, Again, I can talk about so many things in relation to marketization of traditional practices, but that will be for another video lecture. And then, of course, we have the inequities of health human resource in the Philippines. You have a shortage of health workers. We have a total of 106,000 health worker shortage across physician, nurses, and allied healthcare. Now, there's a low staffing ratio. There's only 4.1 doctors and 8.5 nurses per 10,000 population in the Philippines. And the recommendation of WHO is there should be 10 doctors and 40 nurses per 10,000 population. So, ang laki ng kulang. But also, kulang din naman ng plantilla, kulang din naman ng pangbayad. And of course, we have that, and you have heard of this probably before, is the brain drain. Hindi competitive ang economic gains pag nag-nursing ka sa Pilipinas, no? And it's the reason why I was asked by my parents to enroll in nursing because they want me to go to the States. And actually, that's the dream of every nursing, probably also the PTs, probably also the OTs, no? They're thinking about getting hired elsewhere, not in the Philippines, because the pay here is not competitive. The story is some of my colleagues who are chief nurses, who are, some of the chief colleagues are even younger than me. We have 29 years old chief nurses because those who are older, they go out. The life cycle of a nurse in a hospital, you're lucky to have more than 3 years in the hospital because you would expect that in 3 years they've already have taken the licensure exam elsewhere, or they would have migrated to Saudi Arabia or the Australia or the UK. I have some of my classmates who in high school and in college who are now working elsewhere. And then of course, low staffing ratio. Imagine, you have 5 in PGH, Ward 1, male medical ward. You have 5 nurses for 50 patients. Imagine, 10 patients and these patients in PGH, just to let you know, mahina na yung may isa kang sakit per patient. One patient would have at least 2 diseases ongoing. So that's what we call comorbidities, right? we actually label these patients as Christmas tree. When do they become Christmas trees? When you have more than one IV fluid connected to you. So that's like, imagine. And then in that 50, 3 of those are in critical care. Ibig sabihin ready ka to do CPR on these patients. So imagine five nurses, right? So hindi naman ako nag-nurse doon, pero I was a clinical instructor of 12 nursing students, and they're happy when we're there because, for example, if I have 12 students, then I would give my students 2 patients each. I would assign them to 2 patients each, and they would do the care of the 24 patients for the whole of the shift. And so, what is left na yung 26, yun na lang yung take care ng 5. And so, my license is at stake for those 24 patients that my students are caring for, right? But in PGH, they only allow 3 universities to have training in PGH. That's UP, of course, and of course the previous university where I used to work, it's St. Paul University Manila and Pamantasang Lungsod ng Maynila. And then nobody else can have that, which is also weird because different naman in, for example, you have a very high-end hospital like Cardinal Santos. The nurses won't the students do advanced care to the patients because they might be scared for any negligence or malpractice that can happen. We can talk about this later. But yeah, there's low staffing ratio. In the States, bigyan mo ng 4 patients a nurse, aaray na yung nurse. 5 patients a nurse. Kaya tayo gustong-gusto sa States. Kaya tayo gustong-gusto sa ibang bansa kasi sanay tayo 10 pasyente. Pag sinabi mo, can you handle more than 4 patients? Game na game ang nurse kasi mani-mani lang natin yan back here tayo nagkaka-brain drain. So yeah. And then of course, there's maldistribution. In-explain ko nga kanina, oversaturated ng subspecs in the urban metros. In the rural areas, wala masyado ng mga subspecialties. And then, of course, we have 316 Filipino-trained nurses who work abroad. Usually, they eventually stay there, get their green card. In the States, in Singapore, they get their residency. In Hong Kong, they get their residency. In Australia, they get their permanent visas. In the UK, that's the same as well. In the Saudi though, in Middle East though, because there's Saudization and Omanization, hindi, parang wala sa horizon yung pagiging citizen mo doon. You eventually will return to the Philippines and retire here. But, yeah, so we have that brain drain. So that's also an issue. That's why we have not so good healthcare services in the Philippines. So yeah. But we're not necessarily like the worst healthcare system in the world, but we obviously have a lot of talent. We have caring is I would argue, and this is one of the areas of research that I do. Our Filipino DNA, our cultural DNA as Filipinos really put us, is the reason why we are one of the best healthcare workers. Now, we are the most sought after nurse exporters. We're not necessarily, incompetent in terms of healthcare. We have talented people. Some of them are in middle management positions in the government. But of course, there's a lot of, as we see here, a lot of entangled issues. That's why the transformative potential of our healthcare system, is not maximized. And our goal now, as sociologists, is to be able to provide sociological explanations. our goal as sociologists is, and I think this is very crucial, and this is something that I felt when I stepped a little bit into the peripheries of nursing and into the peripheries of sociology, is that it's we have the credence to look at it more critically without reputational damage, right? We can say na, yeah, it's kaya naman nagkakaganyan kasi corrupt. Kaya nagkakaganyan kasi pangit ng political will. Yung mga programa nyo na ganyan, we have the balls to say it, no? Because that's our training. But like for physicians, for nurses, there is that, there is reputational damage or reputational repercussions if you sort of be the one to do the critical thinking, and also might not have those models for you to be able to look at these problems at that level, kasi for example, it's really very easy for physicians and allied healthcare na parang, ba't hindi ba siya nakakasunod? Bakit ngayon ka lang pumunta sa akin kapag malala ka na? As sociologists, we understand na kaya siya dumating dito ng late na kasi nga wala siyang pera, hindi niya kayang ma-afford na umabsent sa trabaho to get, early care. Bakit kayo ka napunta kung kailan malaki na yung tumor? Kasi wala namang cancer center sa probinsya namin, 'di ba? And those are sociological issues, These are medical issues, sure. These are economic and governance issues, but also at the same time, these are sociological issues. And our sociological perspectives are always welcome, should be welcomed, and should be warranted in these moments. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that particular discussion, and we'll talk more about these issues in person, and also in probably I'll talk about them again in future video lectures when we're talking about specific theories. See ya!